This is America, and this, of course, is the White House, where we are still waiting on Donald Trump's reaction to Benjamin Netanyahu's decision at the weekend not to back his 15-point peace plan for Gaza. It comes after months of friction between the pair over the war in Iran. Today we'll be asking whether this is just a simple disagreement over Gaza or whether or not there's a real breakdown in their relationship. I'll have more on that from here in a few minutes' time. First, though, let's go to Alex Marquardt in our Washington, D.C. studio.
For months, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have been mostly united in terms of Gaza, but that partnership is now fraying. It's facing one of its biggest tests, with Netanyahu publicly rejecting the Trump-backed 15-point Gaza peace plan, saying that Israel will not withdraw from Gaza until Hamas is fully disarmed, even as Hamas has indicated a willingness to give up its weapons under the right conditions. This is more than a simple disagreement over the details of a peace plan. It raises a much bigger question. Is Netanyahu breaking with Trump because of legitimate security concerns, or because Trump's vision for ending the war in Gaza goes further than Israel's government is prepared to accept? And then how much is Israel's upcoming election playing into all of this? Richard Gaisford has more.
For most of their working relationship, they've been heading in the same direction. But now Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu appear to be taking different forks at a crucial junction as they navigate the roadmap towards peace in Gaza. At the end of July, the US president announced an historic agreement with complete disarmament. But that wasn't enough to break a stalemate. With Hamas waiting for Israel to withdraw before disarming, and Israel refusing to do so until Hamas disarms. Just days after Trump declared a deal, Israel's prime minister said he couldn't back the plan.
I heard that there were those who said you didn't say it, but we did say it. And here, I'm saying it again. Israel rejects the 15-point plan. The IDF will not carry out any withdrawal until the dismantling of Hamas and its weapons.
The longer all sides have talked about peace, the more territory in Gaza has fallen under Israeli control, with Israel's yellow line shifting, encompassing more land. It had seemed that Donald Trump would be giving the Israeli Prime Minister an important seat at the table, with Benjamin Netanyahu joining Donald Trump's Board of Peace, which didn't include a Palestinian representative. The board recommended an international stabilization force of up to 20,000 foreign troops, but so far Israel's only said yes to around 200, as Benjamin Netanyahu heads towards a general election in October, not wanting to appear soft on Hamas. And the US president is facing the midterms, where his declaration to partner with Israel and go to war with Iran is a major electoral issue.
The US will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too.
Donald Trump's promoted a golden future for Gaza, easier perhaps to create a new reality with artificial intelligence
Trump Gaza #1
than it is to deal with the complexities of the situation whilst persuading Benjamin Netanyahu to stick to the plan. Richard Gaisford, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And Richard joins us now from the White House. Richard, this full-throated rejection of the administration's efforts by Netanyahu, has there been any response to it?
That's really interesting, Alex. No direct response from Donald Trump and neither from the White House. The president was asked about it yesterday at a briefing he was giving inside the White House here about vaccines, making some pretty controversial statements about them. But when he was asked about Gaza, about Benjamin Netanyahu, he said, take a look at my Truth Social post. I've put one there. But when you went to his own social media platform, there was nothing to see. So perhaps some sort of breakdown of communications there. Certainly a breakdown in relationship between the two men, because it was just 2 weeks ago to the day that Benjamin Netanyahu was right here in Washington visiting the city for Lindsey Graham's funeral, the South Carolina senator, and came to the White House to meet with Trump. Now, no cameras allowed, no reporters in the room, and nothing really said about what they talked about. But it has been rumoured, it has been spoken about that perhaps Donald Trump's getting weary, getting angry with what he perceives to be negativity from Benjamin Netanyahu around Gaza. Certainly there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, that both men would always want to be seen at least to be on the same page for the sake of their supporters. Now, you might think that the opposite is true. Perhaps, Alex, both have become an election liability for the other.
Yeah, really trying to read the tea leaves at this point. Richard Gaisford at the White House, thank you very much. Now, as Richard mentioned, with a differing vision for the future of Gaza, there is renewed focus on the Board of Peace. Its stated purpose is to promote peace building around the world, with the first task of overseeing the Gaza peace plan. Initially, the U.S. president invited 62 countries to join, with 25 countries signing the charter. Since then, El Salvador, Kuwait, and Israel have also joined. Several have made specific commitments to the Gaza plan. Some have pledged financial support, while others have indicated that they do intend to send troops to the International Stabilization Force. Joining us now to dive into all of this is Ambassador David Hale. He is the former U.S. Special Envoy for Middle East Peace, and Ambassador Michael Ratney, who is the former U.S. Consul General in Jerusalem. Ambassadors, thank you both for being with us again. Ambassador Ratney, to you first, this forceful rejection by Prime Minister Netanyahu of this Gaza plan, is it about the plan, or is it about the timing ahead of these critical Israeli elections?
I mean, I think it's first and foremost about Netanyahu's election prospects in the next couple of months. Whatever the reality of his interaction with Trump and the degree to which maybe he would acquiesce to some of the elements of this plan is secondary to what he says publicly to his electorate. And I think he bargains that it's better for him to publicly reject the plan and risk whatever reaction he gets from Trump, rather than decide with Trump and then have to explain to his voters why he's doing things that seem to acquiesce to elements for the Palestinians.
Ambassador Hale, what's your read? More political or more ideological?
I think it's both, in perhaps equal measure. No one should be surprised. The Israelis have been saying since this plan was first unveiled last September with the ceasefire and the 20-point plan, they have said every time there's a chance to say it that they will not withdraw from the yellow line until Hamas is fully disarmed and dismembered. And they said it as recently as July 30. Later in that day, the administration announced this plan. So it shouldn't be a surprise that Bibi Netanyahu has said he's not going to do this. Moreover, it's not just that there's an election, but his primary opponents, General Eskanot and Bennett, both oppose any international role in Gaza. So it's not as if this is somehow a point of contest within the Israeli political environment. We also have a problem, which may explain why the Trump administration was trying to jam this through, is that the timetable for Israeli elections are unique. We're now in the campaign season. October 28 is the election day. Then the Israeli president has 7 days to pick a winner to form a coalition. That person then has 28 days to form a coalition extendable by 2 weeks. And they will go right to the deadline, because these elections nowadays are razor thin, and that's the nature of deadlines. So there isn't going to be any kind of bold decision or flexibility or change of the status quo from the Israeli side this year, because that takes us right until the Hanukkah Christmas season.
Are you surprised, Ambassador Ratney, that there hasn't yet been a Trump reaction? What do you think it will be eventually? Because this is someone who wants to see who sees himself as a peacemaker. He has said in the past of Netanyahu that he does what I want. Clearly, that's not true in this case.
I think the whole thing sort of puts Trump in an unusual place. Like, he has this very complicated relationship with Netanyahu to begin with. He wants to be seen as the best champion of Israel in U.S. history. He doesn't want to be seen getting crossways with Israel at a moment where a U.S. election is coming up as well. On the other hand, it seems like Netanyahu kind of irritates him. And he's constantly striking this balance between kind of either saying himself or leaking his irritation with Netanyahu, and then backing off, because I think he doesn't see it as serving his interests to be getting into a spat with Israel, not with respect to Israeli elections and not with respect to the U.S. midterm elections.
So do you see any way, Ambassador Hale, to break this impasse? I mean, you're making it sound like it's a far more profound issue than just the sequencing arguments that we've heard from both Hamas and Israel.
Well, I suspect one reason that the White House has been quiet about this is that they may want to just go back to the drawing board, tinker with the 15 points, see if they can close the gap. see if there's something that Israel can accept. But clearly the red line for the Israelis is that they're not going to withdraw until they see a complete and thorough disarming of Hamas. And they don't, I think, believe that the paper solutions of this international force and the Board of Peace are adequate to reassure the public that Gaza will be safe for the foreseeable future.
But the rejection of this plan by Netanyahu was after quite a bit of back and forth. And in fact, the Board of Peace had already made a significant concession to the Israelis that they would not withdraw back to the yellow line, which is that line that essentially it's 60% occupation of Gaza, until Hamas's weapons were fully decommissioned. So, Ambassador Ratney, do you think Netanyahu is now just trying to move the goalposts?
I think he's just trying to get through this period. He knows he has pressure from the United States and from Trump personally. He doesn't want to trigger some kind of a big public blow up with Trump, because Trump still has quite a bit of influence inside Israel. And although his popularity has declined some, he still has, what he says publicly still matters as these elections come up. So Netanyahu is doing what Netanyahu does best, which is to kind of bob and weave, to figure out what the lines are with the U.S. president, to figure out where he is domestically, and to find a way to muddle through. And he's been pretty good at it historically.
I want to play a little bit more of the very public rejection by the Israeli Prime Minister of this Trump-backed plan. Take a listen.
Now we are talking with the Americans about the issue. They have ideas, some of which are acceptable to us, and some that are not. We know how to stand up to these things. We have proven it in the past, and we are proving it today as well. Additionally, the IDF will continue to thwart threats against our forces and our citizens. Because once again, the existence of Israel and the security of all Israeli citizens is not up for negotiation. We stand firm on these interests.
So Netanyahu is making this about the Hamas disarmament, and he has said that it has to be genuine disarmament, not fictitious disarmament. Ambassador Hale, is this simply an excuse for the IDF to stay in Gaza indefinitely?
Well, certainly a reason. Ultimately, they may want to stay. I don't know the answer to that, but it is a real reason. I mean, after all, look what happened in 2023. This is a highly emotional, neuralgic moment for the Israelis. No prime minister would have really conducted the war differently than Bibi Netanyahu. So I think that what he wants is assurances that when the Israelis are ready to go, Hamas is done. There is no more capacity by Hamas to use weapons. And this, I think there's a lot of interesting elements in this 15-point plan, but it is all theoretical. And the nations that have committed to send troops are not nations that have a strong track record of peacekeeping or familiarity with the situation on the ground, or have the kind of power to stand up to Hamas politically in a global environment. Secondly, it calls for something like 12 or 20,000 Palestinian police officers. Well, where are they? They haven't been trained. Well, Michael and I both have been involved in the training programs that we've conducted for decades for the Palestinians. It takes 18 months to go from scratch to a police officer who's fully vetted and capable. So that's why I don't think that the Israeli side is actually trying to rewrite the rules. I think they have been saying all along, this is not good enough. It doesn't mean that they aren't looking also for creative ways out of the fix they're in Gaza.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has said on the record, on camera, that he told the IDF to take 70% of Gaza and take it step by step after that. What do you think, Ambassador Ratney, is Netanyahu's real goal in Gaza?
I mean, I'll give him credit. I think first and foremost, he needs to be able to say that Israel is secure. Israel had a horrible attack on October 7th, and he doesn't want a repeat of that. But he also is under huge pressure politically because he's being blamed for it. Right? There's never been a commission of inquiry. He's found ways to thwart that. There's huge public anger about the result and how long it took to get the hostages out. So he's trying to balance that as well. So ultimately, there's a security element to it, to be sure, but he's also figuring out what his political lines are and how he can be seen to be protecting Israel's security and telling the public that he's pushing back even on President Trump where it affects Israel's security. But ultimately, it comes down to his calculation of his political viability.
There is a pretty significant vocal part of the population that would like to see Gaza resettled by Israeli Jews.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it doesn't mean the international community is going to stand by if that actually proceeds. I tend to doubt that that's actually a credible proposal. I think there are certainly very vocal Israelis, including political leaders, that would call for such a thing. But even at a moment where you have this highly radicalized population, deeply traumatized. I sort of doubt that I could see that actually going forward.
Let's take a step back and drill down into what exactly is in this 15-point plan. Matthew Torres explains what's in this framework and how it's supposed to help.
The 50-point proposal is not a separate peace agreement, but a roadmap to complete the United States' broader peace deal in Gaza that includes withdrawing Israeli forces while disarming Hamas. Behind the 15 points is the Board of Peace, led by the U.S. government, with President Trump as lifetime chair. It includes 28 nations. Palestinian Authority was not invited to join. The plan first calls for agreement to the larger U.S.-brokered peace deal. Israel, Hamas, and Palestinian factions must halt military operations. Hamas would first give up civilian governance and security responsibilities to an independent Palestinian governing committee. Following those steps, Hamas and other groups would start to disarm in phases, handing over weapons and tunnel control to the new governing body. Disarmament would happen gradually as Israel begins withdrawing troops. The framework then asks Israeli forces to complete their withdrawal under an agreed timeline. No one would be forcibly removed from Gaza. An international security force would help separate Israeli troops from areas controlled by the new governing body, monitor the ceasefire, train Palestinian police, and support humanitarian aid. And once each phase has been completed and verified by the International Committee, the Board of Peace would help develop a plan to rebuild Gaza and secure funding and resources. When Hamas first agreed to the 50-point roadmap in late July, Trump called it a monumental step that requires carefully structured phases. The roadmap requires commitment from all sides. But as we've been telling you, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is seeking re-election, has publicly rejected the deal and is opposed to a two-state solution.
So we heard Matthew there saying that Hamas in the last few days had agreed to this framework. When you go back to last year and the original ceasefire, it stipulated that military action must end. And that clearly hasn't happened. We've continued to see military bombing, Israeli military bombing of the Gaza Strip, more than 1,200 people killed, many civilians. Ambassador Hale, Israel is not abiding by the terms of the original ceasefire. When you look at the two sides, who do you think deserves most of the blame for this inability to move forward?
Oh, I think the blame game when it comes to Arab-Israeli peace is not a really productive area to get into. It's a circle. You can pinpoint blame at any specific point. So I respectfully defer on the question. I do think taking Hamas at face value is not necessarily particularly wise. And you have to ask yourself, why have they accepted this? Well, my guess is, and it's just a guess, is that they need oxygen. They have reached a point of desperation. Their leadership, of course, is decimated. They're not popular in Gaza, we know that. And this agreement may give them that breath of air. And they may be able to use the fact that there really isn't an enforcement mechanism in place to have a pretend disarmament. And a board of what they're calling a committee for the administration of Gaza, which is technocratic, excellent people, civilians to do it, a good move, but they don't have power. So where will power be vested in Gaza, not just next week, next month, but by the end of the year? And the Israelis will say it's going to still be us.
And this notion of disarmament, it's not like they've asked Hamas to come forward, put all their guns in a pile, give them to the Israelis, and the Israelis would destroy them. Explain why it's more complicated than that, and why the Israelis are having genuine, justified hesitation.
Well, there may be hidden agreements. There often are security annexes and things that I'm not privy to. So I have to say I'm only going off what I've seen in the media. But from what I understand anyway, the idea is that these weapons would be given to, would be locked up somewhere and given control to this civilian technocratic committee, right, that will involve international as well as Palestinian people. It's all extremely vague. And again, after October 2023, it's hard to convince the Israelis that that is an ironclad, guaranteed way out of this fix that will ensure their security and bring calm to Gaza.
Do you, Ambassador Ratney, even use the word ceasefire anymore? What we're seeing in Gaza, do you think it's a ceasefire with more than 1,200 killed, according to the UN? Of that, some 300 of them are children?
Yeah, it's a good question. Ceasefires are always messy, and ceasefires are always imperfect. And I think that is one of the challenges here, where the level of trust between the parties is rock bottom, where there's no real check on either side to stop their military actions, whether it's Israel's actions against Palestinian targets in Gaza, or whether it's Hamas continuing to exercise whatever you want to call it, security responsibility inside of Gaza. So it's messy. I think we'd all like to see the violence stop so Gazans can start to live something like a normal life and Israelis can stop worrying about their security.
You mentioned, Ambassador Ratney, the slippage in support for Trump in Israel. Of course, the Israelis were quite happy to see Trump come in after Biden. I want to look at some of these polling numbers because Trump has long touted his popularity in Israel. The recent polling that we've seen suggests that Israelis actually aren't that happy with him. Gallup found that 76% of Israelis approved of U.S. leadership last September 2025, just weeks after Trump ordered strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. But then by June of this year, so just 2 months ago, following the start of the Iran war, those numbers have fallen sharply. According to a poll by Hebrew University, 67% of Israeli respondents said that Trump's policies are bad for Israel, while 28% said that they are very bad. Another 77% agreed that the Trump White House is harming the U.S.-Israel relationship. Ambassador Hale, how much of a tightrope is this for Netanyahu in this moment? Resist these concessions, but don't fully break with the White House.
If I were in his shoes, that's probably the calculus I would make as well. I mean, no Israeli prime minister wants to be permanent at odds with the president of the United States, although this is not unusual, actually. The severity of it may be, the intensity of it may be, but in my career, I have seen these episodes all the time. Netanyahu is the Israeli prime minister every American president loves to hate because he stands up for what he wants, whether or not America agrees with him. And that's where we are now, and that's why the opinion polling shows what it shows. So most Israelis actually want to continue the war with Iran. It's clear that President Trump wants this war to be brought to an end. So I think that's the root of, frankly, of the gap here. And that's been the point of contention between these two leaders all year long.
And it goes both ways. We saw a couple weeks ago when Netanyahu was here, they didn't have any kind of public event. They didn't speak. There was just a photo. It doesn't necessarily help Trump in every quarter to be seen with Netanyahu either. Before we end this conversation, we really have to talk about the West Bank. And there are some really alarming numbers that are coming out of the West Bank, with 1,259 Palestinians killed since October 11th of last year, 2025. And another 4,146 who were injured by Israeli forces. Those are similar numbers in the West Bank to what we've seen in Gaza since the so-called ceasefire went into place. We have daily images of Israeli settlers rampaging across the West Bank. Ambassador Ratney, in your view, is the Trump administration paying enough attention to what's going on there?
I don't have the impression that Washington is paying attention at all to what's happening in the West Bank, and it's potentially quite unnerving. I mean, when I lived there and worked there, settler violence was a problem. It was a significant problem. Now it's off the charts, and it does seem to be a considered policy of the government to, at best, ignore the violence of highly ideological settlers in the West Bank. At worst, kind of almost egging them on, helping them make the West Bank uninhabitable for Palestinians. Washington focused on, obviously, Iran first and foremost, and then whatever is happening in Gaza doesn't seem all that kind of taken with events in the West Bank. And frankly, it could be the point of most explosive potential for that whole region. And
we've seen those settlers, backed by the apparatus of the state, by IDF and security forces. Ambassador Hale, if the Trump administration were to take your advice when it comes to the West Bank, what would you urge them to do? Because when they came into office, they lifted some of the sanctions that the Biden administration had put into place.
Yeah. Well, certainly we need to continue counterterrorism cooperation, which below the radar remains quite good between the Palestinian Authority and American counterparts. So that's a valuable thing. Secondly, we have to look beyond the horizon here. There is going to be a succession crisis of some sort. The corrupt, unelected, illegitimate, current, decrepit leadership is going to go. Well, we don't know what's going to come in its place, and we need to think about that. Third is that the absence of law and order with settlers is, I think, intolerable for any democratic state. Whether there are political currents that agree with the settlers or not is irrelevant. It is the job of the state to secure its territory, or in the case of occupation, to make sure that there's law and order in those areas. And it has fallen short on that, and I would like to see America do more, frankly, to raise the profile of that problem.
Going back to Gaza and the Board of Peace, we only have about a minute left. Ambassador Ratney, how much of a blow to the board of peace is this rejection by the Israelis?
You know, the board of peace was always an imperfect creature. You know, ambivalent support from Israel, not a lot of actual financial support from international bodies, a certain amount of effort from Washington. It was kind of a muddle-through effort that Trump could claim as a victory, but actually hasn't really moved the game that far. So I think, you know, I have rather low expectations for where it'll go unless we see kind of a lot more effort by Washington and by the Israelis to make it a success.
Yeah, it's going to be a very busy, but possibly not very productive next few months, certainly as we look ahead to the Israeli elections. Ambassador David Hale, Ambassador Michael Ratney, thank you both. And that's all from myself and the team here in Washington. I want to hand it back to Richard Gaisford at the White House and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
Well, that's it for this edition of This is America. We'll be back on Wednesday looking at the legal battle surrounding Donald Trump's latest tariffs. That's at 18:30 GMT, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time here in the United States. For now, though, from outside the Oval Office, it's goodbye.